Assemblies/Products Lecture 1 for CAD 32. Okay, next slide. Okay, we're going to be mostly using inches and millimeters. If you forgot how to change units in CATIA, all you have to go is to the pull down up here in CATIA, go to Tools, Options, click on the plus for General, go to Parameters and Measure, go to the Units tab, click on Length, and you can go to the drop down here to pick the units you want to use. So once again, we'll be using inches and millimeters in this class. Next slide. All right, so one thing I do recommend that you start practicing is using your mouse to pan, to zoom in and out, and to rotate. It just makes it faster. Also, if you ever have to go into an interview or where you're given a test, you'll seem a lot faster when you're using the mouse to zoom in and out, rotate and pan versus using the icons in CATIA versus using the toolbars. Okay, so to pan, all you have to do is hold on to the wheel to pan and just move your mouse back and forth. So let's go to CATIA. So here's something you're going to be working on. There's going to be an extra credit assignment if you choose to work on this. Okay, so to pan, hold on to the wheel. Just hold on to the wheel and you can pan. Okay, and then let go of the wheel when you're done. To zoom, if you want to zoom in and out, hold on to the wheel, and then you tap the right button. So you click the right button and release, but hold on to the wheel. That's to zoom in and out. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so I'm going to hold on to the wheel, and I'm just going to tap the right button, hold on to the wheel, and then you can move the mouse up and down to zoom in and out. All right, and finally, to rotate, hold on to the wheel again, and you right click, but you also hold the right button and hold on to the wheel to rotate. Okay, so let's go back. So I'm going to hold on to the wheel, hold on to the right button, and then I can rotate, move the mouse to rotate. Okay, so when you rotate in CATIA, it rotates about a point in the middle of your window or middle of your screen. So let's say, let me zoom out a little bit. Let's say I wanted to rotate about this corner here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click with the wheel, and it's going to take this corner and center it with respect to the screen. So I'm going to, with the wheel, click on this corner. Notice how it moves it to the center of your screen. So it's going to rotate about this corner. So I'm going to rotate, hold on to the wheel, hold on to the right button, and you're going to see it's going to rotate about that point. Keep that in mind because if you wheel click out in the middle of space, notice I clicked in the middle of space. I clicked some random point and it moved it here and it moved everything over. So now when I rotate, it's going to rotate about some random point that I had previously picked. So I hold on to the wheel, the right button. Notice that it's rotating about some random point that I had selected with the wheel earlier. Okay, so keep that in mind. If I want to rotate about the bolt, click with the wheel, let go of the wheel. Now I'm going to hold on to the wheel, hold on to the right button, and it rotates about the bolt, as you can see. All right. Okay, always be aware of which workbench you are in. Okay, so you can go to Start, drop down to go to Part Design Workbench, Assembly Workbench. We're going to be doing drafting and a few other workbenches. CATIA has about 100 workbenches, by the way. We're not going to use all of them. It's just way too much work, and we're only going to go over the most common workbenches. Okay, so the Part Design Workbench, Assembly Workbench, Drafting. And those of you that take CAD 37, you'll be using Generative Shape Design Workbench for surfacing and wireframe. All right, so always be aware of which workbench you are in. So here we have a part, an individual part inside of an assembly. And currently we are in the assembly workbench. You can tell by the double gear. If you wanted to do some work on this part, like let's say you wanted to add a hole pattern, double click on the part body and you'll see the part turn blue. So right now the assembly is active, right? We're in the assembly workbench. Double click on the part body or double click on the actual part and you'll see the part turn blue. Okay, so next slide. So again, imagine double clicking on the part or the part body. So now this will turn blue, letting CATIA know this is active, this is what you're working on, and it'll move over to the part design workbench. All right, so let me demonstrate that. So as you can see, we are currently in the assembly workbench. So if I wanted to make some changes to, let's say, this base plate, if I wanted to make some changes to it, I can just double click and you'll see it'll take me to the part design workbench. So double click. Notice I am now in the part design workbench, and I'm going to hit the plus sign here. You can see the base plate is now blue, letting me know it's going to make changes to this part. If I do any of these features like hole command, pad, or pocket, it'll do it to this part. Okay, so if it doesn't bring you to the part designer workbench, sometimes it'll take you to the generative shape design workbench. So if you've used CAD 37, generative shape design, if you've taken CAD 37, I'm going to click on it. See that it looks like a little lawn chair. So this is to create surfaces and wireframe. If this was the last workbench you used for a part, then it'll take you to this workbench instead of part design. So if this happens where it doesn't take you to the correct workbench, after you double clicked on the part, you can see the part's active. Then I can always just go to the drop down here and go into part design. And it'll take me into the part design workbench. Okay, so if I wanted to simply just make a hole, I'll just randomly create a hole on the part. And okay, there it is. If I wanted to go back to the assembly level, I can just double click at the top and I'm back in assembly workbench. If I want to go to this brown part, this tan part, I can either double click on it or I can just hit the plus and I can just double click on the part body. Okay, so this is the brown piece here. Double click. Okay, now it takes me back to part design workbench. Notice how the sliding block, the brown sliding block is now active. It's brown. My mistake, it's blue. So now if I want to make changes to the brown piece, I can just go ahead, I'll just do a hole once again. And okay, there it is. So I can just click on the part I want to make changes on. Let's say I want to make a change on this blue one. Double click. I'm going to make a hole also just for fun. Way too large. Go with the small diameter. And there's the hole. Okay, and if I want to get out of part design and go back to assembly, just double click at the top of the tree and it'll take me back to assembly workbench. Okay, be aware of which workbench you are in. If it doesn't take you to the assembly workbench, sometimes it'll take you into a different workbench like product structure. Okay, so it's very common when you first start off with CATIA, it defaults to product structure. I don't know why it defaults to this workbench. So you can always just, hey, I don't see constraints. What's going on? How come I don't see the constraints icons? That's because you are in the wrong workbench. So just go to the correct workbench, mechanical design, assembly design workbench. And now you can see your constraints toolbar. Double click to dock it back. All right, so let's move on with the lecture. Okay, so we're going to focus on how to insert a new assembly, how to insert a new part, how to insert existing files like bolts, nuts, washers, for example. They already exist. They are in your folder, in your flash drive, for example. And later we're going to practice how to add constraints. Okay, so we're going to focus on these commands for the next few weeks. I'll be going over manipulation, snap, and constraints on your assignments step by step on YouTube videos. All right, so let's talk about top-down versus bottom-up assembly model. Okay, so let's take a look at top-down. Top-down, you create the assembly first, the top assembly, the main assembly, then model the sub-assemblies, the smaller assemblies, and you model the individual components for each assembly. This method is seen in large assemblies where multiple designers are involved and most or all parts are modeled in context, meaning you're going to model the parts where they go with respect to the assembly. Okay, so let me do a quick example of top-down, and then we'll cover bottom-up. Okay, let me go ahead and close this up. I'm not going to save it. All right, so let me give you an example of top-down. A very good example is an aircraft. I'm not going to obviously do an entire aircraft. That'll take years for me to model something like that on my own. Maybe decades. Okay, so I'm going to start with assembly design. And it'll automatically create an assembly file. Okay, so imagine this is your top assembly, your aircraft. Okay, so I'm going to call it top aircraft assembly. Okay, so I'm going to give it a name. So to do that, once again, I right-click Properties and gave it a name under the Product tab, Top Aircraft Assembly. Okay. So let's imagine we're doing a model airplane out of plastic or out of wood. Okay, so let's say we wanted to bring in a fuselage assembly. All right, so I'm going to insert a fuselage assembly into my top aircraft assembly. So again, this is referred to as top down. We're going from the top down. Okay, so we're going to insert a product. So look for the double gears with the sheet in the background. Click on it. Now you have to tell it where you're going to insert it. I'm going to insert it in the top assembly. And there it is. It inserted an assembly inside of a larger assembly. Okay, so think of it as the top aircraft assembly. Think of it as your backpack. And think of this new assembly as a binder that goes inside your backpack. It's the easiest way to think of it. Top assembly is your backpack. And this new sub-assembly is a binder. Right-click Properties. Let's give it a name. So instance is what's in parentheses. I'm going to call it a fuselage assembly. Watch, I'm going to hit apply, and you're going to see it's going to update here inside the parentheses. Hit apply, 3, 2, 1, apply. So fuselage. Part number is that's the name it's going to take when you save your CATIA files. Okay, so the part number will be whatever you place here in this area where it says product 1. So fuselage assembly, apply. Okay, instance, I'm going to call this instance 0.1. Okay, just in case we make a second copy and a third copy, the second copy will be 0.2, 0.3, and CATIA will automatically number it. Now we only have one fuselage, so there's only gonna be one instance. Where you see multiple instances where you use a bolt over and over again. So fuselage has thousands of, let's say, rivets. So if you insert a number 10 size rivet, the first one will be rivet 1. And if you keep inserting them, the next one will be rivet 2, 3, and so on. That's the instance name. Okay, hit OK. Okay, so once again, think of this as a binder. Now let's just insert something in this binder. I'm going to click, and we're going to insert a solid or a part. So go to the single gear with the sheet in the background. Click on it. And I want you to notice, let me hit the plus sign, that it inserted a new part. Okay, I'm going to call this the fuselage. Right-click Properties. Fuselage 0.1. That's the instance. And the part number or name, I'll call it fuselage. And OK. And I'm just going to model something real quick. Okay, so currently I'm in assembly. If I want to model something, I need to go into part design. So all I have to do is double click on the part body. Double click. Notice now the part is blue, it's active, and it takes me to part design. If it did not take you to part design, let's say it took you to surfacing, you can always go to start and part design. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to model a fuselage real quick. Again, this is just for fun. We're not going to be accurate. I'm not going to constrain it just to save time here. Okay, so just imagine this is the fuselage. There it is. All right, so let's say now I wanted to model the wings. So I'm going to insert a new binder for our wings. Okay, so we're going to have a separate, so currently we have the fuselage assembly. Here's where we model the door and so on and windows. Okay, so now let's do a wing assembly. Okay, so we're going to insert a wing assembly into our backpack. Okay, so we need to go into assembly workbench. So just double click at the top of the tree. Double click. And I'm back in the assembly workbench. Okay, so I'm going to insert a new binder. It's going to be my wing assembly. Okay, so I'm going to tell it I want to insert it in my backpack. The top assembly, I'm going to insert a new binder. There it is. Right click properties, and I'll call it the wing assembly. Call it number 1. Instance 1. All right, so this is my wing assembly binder. So again, my wing assembly binder is inside the backpack, just like the fuselage assembly. Okay, so now I'm going to insert a part inside of the wing assembly. So let me pre-select where I'm going to insert my new part, the wing. And you know what? I'm going to go back and call this the left hand. I'm going to do a left hand assembly, and then I'm going to do a right hand. So let me call this the left wing assembly. Then I'll do a right. Okay, there it is. Okay, left wing assembly. I'm going to pre-select it. So I'm going to insert a part to model my wing. Now it's asking me, do I want to locate this? Do I want to move it? Nope, I'm just going to let it drop with respect to the aircraft coordinates. So hit the plus, and there's my new part. I'm going to call this the left wing. Properties. Call it the left wing. And OK. Okay, so there it is. Now if I want to start modeling, I need to double click on the part body. Let me collapse this part of the tree. So I'm in the left wing. I'm going to double click so I can do some modeling. Double click on the part body. And I'm back to the part design workbench. And on the XY plane, the horizontal plane, I'm going to model a wing. Okay, so go to Sketcher. Okay, so I'm going to just very crudely model a wing. And I'm going to leave an opening for a flap here. It's not a perfect sketch, but just to save time. Okay, there's our wing. And let's go ahead and do a pad. Oh, I misclicked. I meant to do a pad. Let me exit. I'm going to exit. So I'm going to do a pad of the sketch. Let's just make it thin. Cancel. Let me double click on part body. Double click. Oh, I see what happened. I didn't close my sketch. I want you to notice something. I forgot to do a sketch analysis. I cannot do a pad. So let me go back into the sketch. Okay, I should have done a sketch analysis. I didn't close it correctly. So if I do a tool sketch analysis, which I should have done from the beginning, notice it say, hey, your profile is open. Let me click away. Wherever you see cyan, that's a bad sign. Where you see cyan circles, either there's a gap or an overlap. So I got to go in and fix that. Yep, and you can see that I missed. So let me close this sketch analysis. Let me go ahead and put a coincidence constraint. So holding on to the control key, I selected the endpoints. Go to coincidence. There it is. All right, so let's do a tool sketch analysis again. Everything's closed. Okay, good. That's a good sign there. Everything should be good. Exit, and let's do a pad. Yeah, so earlier I was having trouble with the pad because my sketch was not closed. Now we can do a pad. Okay, so there's my wing. Now I'm going to do a flap, so I'm going to insert a new part. So let's go back to top assembly. And I'm going to insert a new part instead of my left wing assembly. So I'm going to select the left wing assembly. Again, think of it as your binder. And insert a new part. Again, I'm inserting a part in my left wing assembly, and it's going to be a flap. Do you want to locate it? In other words, do you want to move the your axis of this new part with respect to the axis of the aircraft? Hey, no, I don't want to move it. I want it to be modeled with respect to the aircraft coordinate system. So I'm going to say no. So when I model the flap, I'm not going to model it at 0, 0 with respect to the wing part. I'm going to model it with respect to the aircraft coordinate system. Okay, so when I model, I'm going to model it here and not at the origin of my part. Okay, so let's give this a new name. Let's call it a flap. Okay, should have called it flap instance 1, but that's okay. All right, so on the XY plane, the horizontal plane, I'm going to model that flap. But first I need to go into part design, double click on the part body, double click. And now I go to the part design workbench. And on the XY plane, the horizontal plane, I'm going to sketch my flap. Okay, so let's go ahead and model a flap here. Exit, I'm not going to constrain it for time. And I'll go ahead and model my flap. Okay, so this is referred to as top-down. Just wanted to give you a little taste for what is top-down modeling. Okay, so then we would insert a new binder. So currently I have the fuselage binder, the left wing. I would then do a right wing assembly. Okay, so the right wing, left wings are first assembled separately, then they're attached to the fuselage. Same thing with the rudder. I would now insert a rudder assembly. I would insert a rudder assembly and then model the rudder in part design. Okay, so this is top down. You're modeling the parts where they go in the aircraft, and this is referred to as context modeling. You're modeling the parts where they go in the aircraft with respect to the aircraft coordinate system. Okay, so now let's do top down. Okay, so we just did top down. We modeled we went from top assembly to smaller assemblies like the fuselage assembly, wing assembly, and eventually modeled the individual pieces like the fuselage, the wing, the flap, and so on. Okay, now let's take a look at bottom up. Okay, bottom up is where the coordinates are not important. You just model the parts individually first, model the parts individually, and then insert them into an assembly. Okay, so let's do a new one. Okay, so bottom down, you start with part design. So let's go to part design. And okay. All right, so I'm just gonna model a plate. So again, we are in part design. Keep it simple just for time. I'll do a centered rectangle. Okay, there it is. Let's give it some color. Right-click properties, graphic, and let's give it some color. Okay, so there's our first part. So we're modeling parts individually, separately first. Notice we're not in the assembly. We have not created an assembly yet. Okay, so now we're going to create a new part. But let me give this one a name. I'll just call it plate or base plate. All right, so I'm going to create a new part. So to create a new part, even though we're in part design, I'm going to go back into part design workbench. Now CATIA recognizes we are already in part design. So when we click back on part design workbench, it knows to create a new part. So if I click on it, oh, you want a new part. Okay, let's do that new part. So now you're wondering what happened to the first part. Well, if you go to window, drop down, it's still there. We can go back to base plate. There it is. We can window vertical, so we can see both windows, the base plate and our new part. I'm going to call the new part a shaft. So I'll make a cylinder. Call it shaft. And okay, and I'll just draw a circle and do a pad to create our shaft. Okay, there's our shaft. Okay, so now, again, we're doing bottom up. So after we model our parts, then we're going to insert them into an assembly. So now let's go into assembly workbench. So assembly design. There it is. It creates a new file for assembly. Let's go window vertical so we can see all three windows. Window, vertical, or you can go horizontal. Okay, so now let's call this our top assembly or main assembly. And okay. All right, so now we're going to insert our parts into the assembly. So we can either drag and drop. So left mouse click, hold on. Oh, try it again. Left mouse click, hold down. So left mouse click, hold on to the button and just drag it over. It's going to just drop it into the assembly. There it is. It dropped it in. So that's one option. You can drag and drop. You can also drag and drop assemblies into a larger assembly. It's dangerous, especially if it's a large file. You don't want to drag and drop a large assembly into another assembly, especially if it eats up a lot of memory. The safe way of doing it is to right click. So whether it's an individual piece or an assembly that you're inserting into another assembly, the safe way is to right click, copy, and then go to your top assembly, right click, paste, and it drops it in. Okay, so this is referred to as bottom up. You model the parts individually, and then you drop them into an assembly. Okay, so this is referred to as bottom up. And once again, you can always drag and drop. If you're dealing with a huge file and you're trying to drag and drop it, it may eat up a lot of memory as you're dragging and dropping, and it may freeze up your computer or freeze up CATIA. Okay, so it's safer to right-click copy and then right-click paste. Okay, so this is bottom up. Okay, once you're ready to save your files, assembly files will be saved with the extension .cat product. Parts will be saved as .cat part. If it's a drawing, it'll save it as .cat drawing. So anytime you save a file in CATIA, it'll give it an extension. That way it'll let the computer know how to open it. So if you ever double click on a CATIA part, if you double click on it, the extension .cat part tells the computer to open it in CATIA. If you ever look at a PDF file like this one, .pdf, when you double click on that file, the .pdf tells the computer to open it in Acrobat Reader. If it has a .xls extension, a spreadsheet, that'll open it in Excel. .doc extension, that's a document, it'll open it in Word. All right. Okay, when you're ready to save, go to File Save Management. Avoid Save All, especially if you're working with a team of designers and you're putting your parts into the same assembly. So for example, if you're working on this part and somebody else is working on this part, you don't want to hit File Save All because you're going to end up overriding any work the other designer is doing. Maybe the other designer has already modeled a bunch of features on it, like holes and slots, for example. And if he or she saves it into the system and then you hit Save All here, you're going to override their work. Okay, so you never want to hit Save All. I did it my first year, my first real job. I hit Save All and I overwrote somebody else's work, and I got in trouble for it. I admitted to it, and so the designer this designer lost hours of work, had to redo the modeling and the NC programming because I hit Save All. Never hit Save All. Okay, so the safe way is to go with Save Management. Use Save Management, File Save Management. So we'll go File, Save Management. Go to your top assembly. And you're going to save it into a folder, preferably. Okay, go to Save As. And just to speed this up, on the desktop, I'll just I'll create a new folder. Call it Top Assembly. So create a new folder to drop in your files. Go ahead and open it. And you're going to save your top assembly into this new folder. Even though I hit saved, it actually has not saved it yet. So once I save my top assembly, it'll auto-save the shaft and auto-save. See here it says auto-save. It'll also auto-save the plate. So anything inside of this top assembly, it'll auto-save it. And you can hit OK, and it'll save it into that folder. Okay, I'm going to cancel it. I'm not going to save this work. Okay, so always use File Save Management because you can visually see what you're saving and where you're saving it to, the location. In this case, desktop, top assembly folder. All right, so let's go continue with the lecture. Oh, and by the way, if anything has been changed on the part as you were creating your assembly, it'll say modified. If you did not make any changes, it'll say open. Again, modified if you changed something in the assembly, or maybe you modified the part. Maybe you added a hole or a slot or a pocket. And there's also new. If you create a new file, it'll be listed as new. Okay, so Save Management will give you a preview of where you're saving it, what you're saving, any changes to the part, any new parts before you hit OK, and it actually does the saving. Okay, finally, sometimes you're going to be dealing with large files, and I'm talking about files that may take you 20-30 minutes to open because they're so large. So I've had to open files, for example, a fuselage assembly or a wing assembly where there's just so many parts and so many smaller assemblies that when you open it, it may take 20-30 minutes to open your files, or it may even freeze your computer. One option is to go to Tools Options, just like we do with units. Go to Tools Options. Instead of hitting General, go to Infrastructure. Go to Product Structure. And you can turn on the cache or cache, depending on, some like to pronounce it differently, cache or cache. Go to Product Structure, Cache Management. select the box, and you would have to restart CATIA. So let me go ahead and expand this window. I can just go to max. So imagine I saved all this work and I went into cache mode. Okay, so once again, if you went into cache mode, hit OK, save your options that you selected. So now I would close CATIA, restart CATIA, and reopen this file. When I open it in cache mode, these are going to come in as shells, like dormant. So the models are going to be dormant, and it's not going to show you any of the features. It will not show you the sketch. It will not show you the pat command. It'll be dormant. You're not even going to have a little plus sign to open it. So to save memory, everything comes in dormant. And if you wanted to just work on one part, but you wanted to see all the other parts in relationship to your part, if you're just going to work on this part and ignore all the other dozens or hundreds of parts, you can go to this one and just double click on it, and it would load anything. It would load all its features, and you can start doing some modeling like hole, slots, pocket, while keeping all the others dormant. If you wanted to do some work on this piece, then all you would have to do is double click, and it would load all its features, sketches, pads, hole command, pocket command, while the other parts remain dormant, and that's to save memory and not slow down your computer. Okay, so this is the end of Lecture 1.